Go ahead and satisfy the safe. That's what she said to him. I heard every word through the baby monitor she forgot was still connected to the kitchen speaker. If I'd known that a single Bluetooth device would save my life and destroy my wife's, I would have bought stock in the company that made it. But nobody plans for the moment their entire marriage detonates. You just survive it and figure out the rest later. My name's Marcus Webb. I'm 42 years old, and until about 13 months ago, I ran a plumbing company in Odessa, Texas Webb, and Sons Plumbing, even though the Sons part was aspirational. I'd started it with a used van and a toolbox when I was 24, and by the time this whole mess kicked off, I had 11 employees, 3 trucks, and enough commercial contracts to keep the lights on comfortably. Not wealthy, not flashy, but solid. The kind of life where you know exactly what next month looks like. My wife Rachel was a different story. She grew up in Midland, daughter of 2 orthopedic surgeons who never let anyone forget it. Her mother, Diane Hartley, introduced herself at our wedding reception by telling my uncle, a retired electrician, that she'd always admired people who work with their hands in a tone that made it sound like she was complimenting a golden retriever for learning a new trick. 18 years of marriage, and Diane never stopped looking at me like I was a stain on her daughter's potential. Rachel and I had 2 kids. Ethan, 15, already taller than me and quieter than anyone his age should be. And Lily, 10, who had my stubbornness and her mother's smile and a habit of asking questions that could crack open your chest. They were the reason I got up at 5 every morning, the reason I worked Saturdays, the reason I did everything I did. The morning it started, I was underneath a commercial sink at a restaurant on 8th Street when my phone buzzed. Rachel had texted, "Coming home late tonight. Victor's hosting a workshop on passive income strategies. Diane's coming too." Victor Ames. That name had been circling our household like a vulture for about 4 months. He'd moved to Odessa from Phoenix, rented an office suite downtown, and started running financial coaching seminars with titles like Unlock Your Wealth, Blueprint, and Freedom Architecture. He had a podcast, a white Range Rover, and the kind of tan that suggested he'd never fixed a pipe in his life. Rachel had met him at a charity luncheon Diane organized, and within weeks she was attending his workshops twice a week, buying his online courses, and casually mentioning that real wealth comes from leveraging other people's systems, not trading time for money. That last one was aimed at me. I let it slide, the way I'd been letting things slide for years. What I didn't let slide was what happened 3 weeks before that text message. I'd come home early because Lily had a fever and found Rachel in the kitchen on a video call with Victor. The laptop was angled so she couldn't see me in the hallway. Victor was leaning into his camera that manufactured intimacy coaches use and saying, "Rachel, you are so much more than what your current situation reflects. The universe has bigger plans for you. We just need to remove the obstacles." I stood there long enough to hear my wife respond. "I know. I've been thinking about what you said, about the fund. Marcus would never go for it, but if I handle it the right way, he won't even know until it's done." I backed out of the hallway silently, took Lily to the pediatrician, and spent the rest of the afternoon thinking, not panicking, thinking. Because when you grow up the way I did, father gone at 6, mother working double shifts at a meatpacking plant, sharing shoes with your brother until high school, you learn to think before you react. Panic is a luxury for people who've never had to survive. That night, after the kids were asleep, I went to my office and started preparing. I pulled every financial record I could find, bank statements, credit card bills, the login for the investment account Rachel managed. What I found made my stomach drop. Over the past 3 months, Rachel had moved $47,000 from our joint savings into a new account I'd never seen. The transfers were structured in amounts just under 10,000 classic structuring to avoid bank reporting thresholds. She'd learned that somewhere, and I had a pretty good guess where. I didn't confront her. Instead, I called my buddy Greg Salazar, who'd been my best friend since high school and was now a forensic accountant in Houston. I told him everything. "Marcus, she's being groomed," Greg said flatly. "This Victor guy is running a textbook affinity scam. He builds trust through workshops, identifies targets with accessible cash, and convinces them to invest in some fund that doesn't exist. The structuring is the giveaway someone taught her to move money under the radar. What do I do? Document everything. Don't touch the accounts. Don't confront her. And hire a lawyer yesterday." I did exactly that. The lawyer was a woman named Patricia Reyes, a family attorney in Midland who'd handled half the ugly divorces in the Permian Basin. She was direct in a way I appreciated. "Mr. Webb, if your wife is moving marital assets without your knowledge and potentially participating in financial fraud, You're in a strong position for custody and asset protection. But we need evidence, not suspicion. So I got evidence. I installed a dash cam in my truck that also backed up to cloud storage. I started keeping a detailed journal with dates, times, and observations. And I did one thing that changed everything. I set up the baby monitor. We'd stopped using it years ago when Lily outgrew her crib, but it was still connected to a Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen. I paired it to my phone, put the camera unit in the living room bookshelf behind a row of Lily's Harry Potter books, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. 4 days later, Rachel had Victor over while I was at work and the kids were at school. The monitor picked up everything with crystalline audio. Victor walking her through how to liquidate my company's business account. Rachel asking about the fund, his cornerstone growth fund, and when she'd see returns. Victor reassuring her that once she put in the full amount, they could transition to phase 2. And then this exchange, which I listened to sitting in my truck outside a job site with my hands shaking. What about Marcus? Rachel asked. What about him? Once the money's moved, you file for divorce. You get the house, the kids, and he gets the debt. His business is leveraged one bad quarter, and it folds. Your mother's already agreed to fund the custody battle. He'll fight. Let him. A plumber from Odessa versus Diane Hartley's attorneys? Rachel, sweetheart, this isn't even a contest. And us? You said after this is done. After this is done, we take the returns from the fund, move to Scottsdale, and start the life you were meant to live. Not this. I could hear him gesture, probably at our home, our life, everything I'd built. Rachel laughed. It wasn't a sound I recognized. He still thinks I'm going to yoga on Tuesdays. I sat in my truck for 20 minutes after the recording ended. Then I called Greg and Patricia and played it for both of them. Patricia's response was immediate. This is gold. Keep recording. Don't change your behavior. We're going to let them execute their plan just far enough to hang themselves. Greg added, Marcus, I want to look into this Cornerstone Growth Fund. If it's what I think it is, your wife isn't just cheating on you. She's about to become an accessory to securities fraud. 3 weeks later, Rachel made her move. I came home from work to find Ethan sitting on the porch steps, staring at his phone, and Lily playing with the neighbor's dog. Where's Mom? I asked. Ethan didn't look up. She left around noon, took a bunch of stuff, said she was staying at Grandma Diane's for a while, and that you two needed space. I walked inside. The safe was open. She'd taken the $12,000 in cash I kept for emergencies and the folder with our insurance policies. Our bedroom closet was half empty. Her jewelry was gone. Her laptop was gone. On the kitchen counter, she'd left her wedding ring sitting on top of a sticky note that said, I deserve more than this. My attorney will be in contact. Lily came inside and saw the ring. Is Mommy on a trip? Something like that, sweetheart. When's she coming back? I looked at my daughter, her face open and trusting, and something inside me went very still. Not angry, not sad, still. Like the moment before you turn a wrench, and you know exactly how much pressure to apply. I don't know yet, but you and me and Ethan were going to be just fine. Ethan appeared in the doorway. He'd put his phone away. Dad, I need to tell you something. He paused, clearly wrestling with it. Mom's been meeting Victor at his office, not for workshops. I saw them through the window when I was walking home from practice last month. It wasn't a business meeting. I know, son. You know, I've known for a while, and I've been handling it. The relief on his face nearly broke me. He'd been carrying that for weeks, afraid to tell me, afraid of what it meant. 15 years old, and already keeping adult secrets. So what happens now? He asked. Now, I said. We order burgers and I make some phone calls. The next morning, I filed for emergency custody through Patricia. The same day, Greg delivered his preliminary findings on the Cornerstone Growth Fund. It didn't exist. Not as a registered security, not as an LLC, not as anything. Victor Ames was collecting money from at least a dozen investors, mostly women he'd met through his seminars and funneling it through a shell company in Nevada. Classic Ponzi structure. The early investors got small returns paid from new investors' money, creating the illusion of legitimate gains. Our $47,000 was in there somewhere, mixed with everyone else's. Greg had also pulled Victor's background. His real name was Victor Amato. He'd been charged with wire fraud in Arizona 3 years earlier, but the case was dropped when the key witness recanted. Before that, he'd run a similar scheme in Colorado under the name Vincent Anders. He changes his name and moves states every few years, Greg told me. Your wife picked a real winner. I gave everything to Patricia, who packaged it and sent it to the Texas Attorney General's office. I also made an anonymous call to the SEC's whistleblower line. Then I waited. Rachel called me 2 days after she left. Her voice had that controlled calm she used when she wanted something. Marcus, we should discuss this like adults. I've retained an attorney, and we can mediate. Rachel, I want you to listen carefully. I know about Victor. I know about the fund. I know about the 47,000 you structured to avoid reporting thresholds, which is a federal crime called structuring, by the way. I know Victor's real name is Amato, and he's been running this con across 3 states. And I know your mother is funding your divorce because she thinks her money and her lawyers can steamroll a plumber. Silence. 10 full seconds of it. How? It doesn't matter how. What matters is that you have a choice right now. You can cooperate with my attorney, agree to my custody terms, and I will do everything in my power to keep you out of a federal indictment. Or you can fight me, and I will make sure every piece of evidence I have ends up in front of a grand jury with your name highlighted in yellow. You have until Friday. She hung up. 2 hours later, Diane Hartley called. Marcus, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but Rachel is my daughter, and I will spend every cent I have to. Diane, did Rachel tell you what Victor's fund actually is? Did she tell you it's a Ponzi scheme, and that your daughter helped recruit investors? Because when the SEC investigates, and they will, every dollar you gave Rachel that ended up in that fund makes you a participant. Not a victim, a participant. More silence. I was getting used to it. That can't be right. Ask your lawyers. Better yet, ask Rachel to show you the fund's SEC registration. She can't, because it doesn't exist. Diane hung up without another word. Friday came. Rachel didn't call. Instead, Patricia received a letter from Rachel's attorney requesting an extension on all proceedings. Translation: Rachel was panicking, and her lawyer was trying to buy time. The following Tuesday, the Texas AG's office executed a search warrant on Victor's downtown office. They seized computers, financial records, and client files. Victor was arrested at his apartment that evening. The local news ran the story at 10 o'clock. I watched it with Ethan, who'd stayed up past his bedtime specifically for this. That's the guy? Ethan asked, watching Victor being led out in handcuffs, his white Range Rover visible in the background. That's the guy. He looks smaller than I remember. They always do. 2 days after Victor's arrest, Rachel showed up at the house unannounced. I was in the garage changing the oil in my truck when her mother's Mercedes pulled into the driveway. Rachel got out looking like she hadn't slept in days. No makeup, hair unwashed, wearing the same yoga pants she used to put on for her fake Tuesday classes. I need to see the kids. You can see them at the Family Court Supervised Visitation Center. Patricia filed the paperwork yesterday. Marcus, please. I'm their mother. You're their mother who abandoned them to run a financial scam with her boyfriend. The court can decide how much access you get. It wasn't like that. Victor manipulated me. He told me the fund was legitimate, that we'd double our money in. Rachel, I have recordings. I have you and Victor in our living room, on camera, planning to liquidate my business, destroy my credit, and take my kids. Do not stand in my driveway and tell me you were manipulated. She stared at me, and for the first time in our entire marriage, she had nothing to say. No excuse, no deflection, no subtle implication that I wasn't smart enough to understand the situation. Just silence, and the slow dawning recognition that she'd underestimated the plumber. She got back in the car. Diane, sitting in the driver's seat, wouldn't look at me. The custody hearing happened 6 weeks later. Judge Harold Banks reviewed the evidence, the recordings, the financial records, the structuring violations, the SEC complaint, and awarded me full temporary custody in about 15 minutes. Rachel's court-appointed attorney, a young woman who clearly hadn't expected to be defending a fraud case in family court, barely put up a fight. Mrs. Webb, Judge Banks said, peering over his glasses, the evidence before this court indicates not only abandonment of your minor children, but active participation in a scheme that jeopardized your family's financial security. I'm granting Mr. Webb full custody with supervised visitation available to you upon completion of a parenting evaluation and financial accountability course. Rachel nodded, hollow-eyed. Behind her, in the gallery, Diane sat rigid and expressionless. Her husband, Richard, who'd barely said 10 words to me in 18 years of family dinners, was staring at the floor. Outside the courthouse, Ethan was waiting in Patricia's car. He'd insisted on coming, even though I told him he didn't need to. How'd it go? He asked as I got in. We're good. You and Lily are with me. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for months. Dad, I need to tell you one more thing. I didn't say it before because I wasn't sure, but Grandma Diane. She knew about Victor before Mom did. She met him first at some fundraiser, and she's the one who introduced them. Mom told her friend Karen on the phone. I heard it when I was getting water late one night. I gripped the steering wheel. Diane hadn't just funded the divorce. She'd engineered the entire affair. She'd hand-delivered her own daughter to a con man because she thought it was Rachel's ticket out of a marriage she'd never approved of. Thank you for telling me, Ethan. That took guts. He shrugged with a teenager's practiced indifference, but I could see the weight lifting off his shoulders. I called Greg that night. I need you to look into Diane Hartley's finances, specifically any investments she made through Victor's fund. It took Greg 2 weeks. What he found was devastating. Diane hadn't just introduced Rachel to Victor, she'd invested $280,000 of her own money in the Cornerstone Growth Fund. She'd also recruited 3 of her friends from the Midland Country Club, bringing in another $400,000. Diane Hartley, who'd spent 18 years looking down at me from the summit of her medical practice wealth, was one of Victor's biggest marks. And now she was also potentially his biggest co-conspirator, because recruiting investors for an unregistered security is a felony. I gave everything to the SEC investigator handling Victor's case. I didn't do it anonymously this time. I sat in their office, handed over the documents, and answered every question they had. Mr. Webb, you understand that your mother-in-law could face criminal charges based on this information? I understand. She orchestrated the introduction between my wife and a convicted fraudster because she wanted to break up my marriage. My children were collateral damage. If that has legal consequences, that's her problem. Victor's trial came 4 months later. He pleaded guilty to 12 counts of wire fraud and 3 counts of securities fraud. The judge gave him 9 years. During sentencing, 3 of his victims, elderly women, who'd lost their retirement savings, gave impact statements that had the entire courtroom in tears. Rachel was charged separately with conspiracy and structuring. Her case dragged on for another 2 months before she took a plea deal. 3 years in federal prison, 5 years probation, and full restitution of the $47,000 she'd moved from our accounts. Her sentencing hearing was on a Wednesday. I took the day off work. She stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face pale under the fluorescent lights. When asked if she had anything to say, she turned and looked at me. I'm sorry, Marcus. Not for getting caught, for what I did to our family, for what I did to our children. I don't expect you to forgive me. I said nothing. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give yet. Maybe someday. Not today. As the bailiff led her away, I walked out of the courthouse into the Texas sunshine and called Lily, who was at a friend's house after school. Hey, sweetheart. How was your day? Good. We made volcanoes in science class. Mine erupted the biggest. Can we get ice cream? Absolutely. Whatever flavor you want. Dad? Yeah? Are you happy today? I thought about that. About Rachel in handcuffs. About Diane Hartley, whose medical practice was now under review after the SEC investigation revealed she'd used business accounts to fund her investments with Victor. About Richard Hartley, who'd filed for divorce from Diane after discovering the extent of her involvement. About Victor Amato, starting his 9-year sentence in a federal facility in Fort Worth. Yeah, Lily. I think I am. 2 months after Rachel's sentencing, my phone rang at 6 in the morning. It was Patricia. Marcus, I have news. Rachel filed an appeal claiming she was coerced by Victor and that her guilty plea was made under duress. But the prosecution submitted the recordings you made, the ones where she's clearly a willing participant planning to destroy your finances. The appeal was denied within a week. And there's more. The IRS opened an investigation into Diane's tax filings. Apparently, she'd been claiming the money she gave Victor as charitable donations. That's tax fraud on top of everything else. I poured my coffee and watched the sunrise through the kitchen window. The light hit the backyard where Ethan had set up a basketball hoop, and Lily had planted sunflowers along the fence. This house, this life, it was mine now. Fully, completely mine. That same week, the owner of the largest commercial real estate group in West Texas called me directly. He'd heard about my work, my reputation, my contracts with restaurants and office buildings across the Permian Basin. He wanted Webb and Sons to handle all plumbing for his 47 properties. The contract was worth more in 1 year than I'd made in the previous 3 combined. Mr. Webb, I'll be honest, he said over lunch at a steakhouse in Midland. I looked into you after the whole situation with your wife became public. A man who handles that kind of crisis with that much composure and still keeps his business running and his kids taken care of, that's the kind of person I want maintaining my buildings. I shook his hand and tried not to think about the irony. Rachel and Diane had spent years believing my profession was beneath them. Now it was the very thing that made people trust me. That night, after Lily was asleep and Ethan was on a video call with his friends, I sat in my office with a beer and the folder of legal documents that had defined the past year. Custody orders, divorce decree, financial settlements, SEC correspondence. A whole marriage reduced to paper. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Marcus, it's Diane. I know I have no right to ask, but Richard left me. The practice is under investigation. I may lose my license. I just want to see my grandchildren. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. This woman who'd called my hands dirty, who'd told Rachel at our 10th anniversary dinner that it's never too late to aim higher, who'd introduced her own daughter to a con artist because a plumber wasn't good enough for the Hartley family name. I typed back, "The kids are doing great." Ethan made the honor roll. Lily won the science fair. They're happy and safe. That's what matters. Then I blocked the number. Ethan appeared in the doorway, holding 2 bottles of root beer. "Saw your light on. Everything okay?" "Everything's great, son. Come sit down." He dropped into the chair across from my desk, and we sat there for a while, not talking about anything important, school, basketball tryouts, whether we should get a dog, normal things, safe things. The kind of conversations I'd been too busy or too stressed to have a year ago. "Dad," Ethan said eventually, "I'm glad it's just us." "Me too, buddy. Do you think Mom thinks about us?" "I think she does. Every single day." "Good." He took a sip of root beer. "She should." I looked at my son, this kid who'd carried secrets to protect me, who'd stood up in ways no 15-year-old should have to, who'd chosen truth over comfort every single time, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger at Rachel, not satisfaction at how things turned out. Just gratitude. For Ethan and Lily, for Greg and Patricia, for the baby monitor behind the Harry Potter books that had recorded the moment my wife sold our family for a con man's smile. Rachel would serve her 3 years. Diane would deal with the IRS and the medical board. Victor would rot in Fort Worth. And Marcus Webb, the plumber from Odessa who wasn't good enough for the Hartley family, would keep building, keep providing, keep showing up at 5 in the morning because that's what fathers do. The next morning I made pancakes. Lily wanted blueberries. Ethan wanted chocolate chips. I made both because I could. Because this was my kitchen, my house, my family, and nobody was going to take that from me ever again. "Dad," Lily said through a mouthful of pancake, "can we get a puppy? We'll talk about it this weekend." "That means yes." She bounced in her chair. Ethan caught my eye across the table and grinned. The first real grin in over a year. Outside, the Texas sun was coming up over the flatlands, turning everything gold. I refilled my coffee and thought about the call I'd make later, the one accepting the new contract, the one that would double my business and give my kids the kind of future Rachel's parents always said I couldn't provide. Funny how that works. Rachel wanted more. Diane wanted better. Victor promised them both. And in the end, the plumber kept everything.